Resetting your life after ending a friendship or relationship can be hard, but it can also be beautiful. Clinical psychologist Usli Mbata joins us once again, and together we will uncover the practical strategies and empowering insights to support individuals in resetting and rebuilding their lives after ending a relationship. Thanks for joining us again, Usli.
Always a pleasure.
Now, it is so incredibly important to be able to reflect, take stock and kind of assess the relationships that you have in your life. I know for myself, COVID was a big time out for me to kind of suss out who do I have in my life, who builds me up and who breaks me down. How important is that frequent revisiting of the relationships in your life?
Yeah, I think it's so crucial. You know, I think often as people, we're doing it in times of crisis. And we're not also doing it when things are just okay and we're just getting along with it. So I think it's very, very important that even if you're not doing it with your partner, but that you're definitely doing it internally, you're having a reflective process, you're giving yourself the time to be able to do this. So as regularly as you possibly can. I mean, usually we all have a moment in a weekend somewhere, that we can kind of sit down and think about this. And perhaps you can even just now and then have a kind of a conversation with your partner. So, you know what, how are you doing, actually? How are you doing? Checking in. Absolutely. Checking in to just see how are you feeling. You know what, maybe even if you're more stressed than usual, see how that's impacting the relationship, But the open conversation, the fact that you can have an open conversation about it is the most important.
How are we able to discern whether a relationship is still fulfilling and is still healthy for you? What signs should we look out for?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some practical physical signs, like if you're actually losing sleep, for instance, over things that are happening in a relationship. And this happens sometimes, I think, more obviously with work. But it can happen with friendships too. It can happen in romantic relationships. And you can find that you just feel that you're being stretched a little too much. It's a little too much is being asked of me in this situation. So if you see that your mood is changing, if you see that you're perhaps becoming resentful when you're being asked to do certain things, or every time you have to go and approach a particular person or a particular situation, perhaps it's time just to look at it a little bit more closely.
I can agree with that. But sometimes it's not that easy to be able to identify a relationship that you kind of just need to let go of. What are some of those contributing factors that make people stay, whether it's an unhealthy relationship or a work situation? What are some of those things that make it so difficult to say goodbye?
Yeah, well, I would say one of the biggest ones that I've experienced personally, and I'll say anecdotally, is the fear of what is going to happen. The fear, for example, I lose the consistency in my life because this relationship is gone. So things might be really, really different. I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I'm afraid of what people are going to say. I mean, in Zulu, we have the whole thing, like, if either I change this relationship or I bring this particular thing about in my life, even if it means bringing to an end a particular relationship with a certain person. So I think the fear, the anticipation very often contributes to it. Sometimes it's financial dependence, sometimes it's emotional dependence that we have on a person, even if they are toxic in our lives. So these are the things that we really need to look at a bit closely and actually ask ourselves, like, why am I still here?
How then do we end the relationship with compassion and respect, both for the other party and for yourself?
Yeah, I often encourage people to not make any drastic actions while they're in the most emotional, while they're still the most emotional about a particular issue, about a particular person or situation they find themselves in. So sometimes it really helps to process the emotions first, and then you can sort of have what is a sensible or, not as heated conversation about it. You might want to write some things down. And I think writing it down also helps you to really, really put your thoughts out on paper. You can see what it is, and you can formulate the thoughts about it a little bit better so that by the time you have the conversation, you've just considered probably more than once what it is that you're going to say. Talking to someone else about it really helps. It helps that you have had somebody else hear what it is that you're going to say.
To kind of say, am I crazy?
Yes.
Is it just me?
Is it just me? Or, and sometimes I find that it's very validating too, because you can think that what's happening in your head is very exaggerated, but actually after a conversation with someone, you find that, oh my goodness, actually, maybe I've been sitting on this way too long. So definitely having a process in between to mediate it, whether it is you slowing yourself down to write about it, to think about it, to speak to someone about it. But I would say don't act on it the moment that you feel something. First, sit on that feeling and see what it is actually trying to show you.
You know, Slee, at the top of your answer, you spoke about you first need to kind of dig deep, assess your feelings. How is Balisa feeling about the specific person and the ending of this relationship? For myself, that automatically brings up feelings of guilt. I feel kind of bad that I'm letting go of someone who's been part of any stage of my life. How does one then manage those feelings of guilt and uncertainty when they've made that decision? And what other practical tips? I mean, you spoke about physically writing down the feelings so that when you have the conversation, you know exactly what to say. What other practical tips and techniques can we use?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely speaking to someone about this, I can't stress enough the importance of having some kind of counseling, right? So for some people, it is with a spiritual counselor in a church. It's somebody in your community. It might be an aunt that you know. But having another voice in your head other than yourself is really, really crucial. Guilt is so normal as well as a feeling that comes up in situations like this. And I think often we can personalize it a little too much. So the normalizing process of that is incredibly important. So I think the moment that you're able to be outside of your own head, perhaps have a conversation with someone else, perhaps get a little bit of counsel on that particular issue, and recognize why the guilt is coming up too. Are you just a person who might be very accommodating of other people?
A people pleaser.
Yes, you know, guilt comes up sometimes for very valid reasons, but sometimes we also have such a thing as misplaced guilt. It's there, and just because it's there doesn't mean you always have to believe it and go with it. So you need to understand the role that the guilt itself is playing, I think, before you decide to act on it one way or the other.
It seems as if self-policing, reflection, and also community is extremely important when being able to end a very important relationship. Slee, it's always such a pleasure to be able to touch base with you and just unpack such big topics. Ngiyabonga sisi wami.
Thank you for having me.
Now, please do remember, healing and moving forward after a relationship has ended is a gradual process, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. Be patient with yourself. Practice self-compassion and trust that with time and effort, you will emerge stronger and more resilient than ever.